Good morning. Hello and welcome. My name is Bhuvan Apurvajha. This is the editorial edge, in fact, the revamped version of it that is now being presented to you by StudyIQ IAS English that goes by the name of Indian Express Explained. Okay, here we seek to take a look and a comprehensive look at the explained page of Indian Express and additional topics that are of extreme importance insofar as your preparation is concerned. Okay. Sriram, Bulbul, Coder, Revisit. Good morning, guys. Thank you for joining. Let's get started without a further delay. Okay. So once again, if you want to go ahead and access the PDF of this entire lecture, this is where you're going to find it. Go ahead and scan this barcode. And if you have any particular questions for me, well, you can go ahead and shoot them for me at my email ID that goes by the name of bhuvan.jha@studyiq.com. All right. Okay, let's get started with the first Indian Express topic that I have for you that is in its explained page today. And that seeks to understand and take a comprehensive look at the whole India-Israel arc of relationship that has, say, developed or come into being since independence, right? So we are going to take a look at, say, the basics of the Israel-Palestine dispute, the conflict. But more importantly, where does India stand in that? And what has India's approach been since 1947? All right, let's get started. So first what we are going to do is break down this entire conversation into 4 parts. Okay. First, we'll understand what was the Indian approach just after independence. What was the guiding motivation for the Indian approach then? All right. Thereafter, we'll take a look at the middle years, the years of Prime Minister Indira Gandhi and Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi, and what was happening during that time when it came to India-Israel relationships. Then we'll go ahead and understand the 90s, when a shift in India's approach towards Israel happens. Okay, we'll seek to understand what are the causes of that. And then we'll shed a light on the recent, say, bonhomie that has developed between the two nations. What are the areas of convergence? And how has India managed to change the basic structure of this relationship since its post-independence years? All right, that's going to be a focus of attention. So let's go ahead and understand it one by one. Okay. So when you want to go ahead and understand the post-independence years, but before that, it is important that you go ahead and realize that our post-independence years, you are looking at a time when India has just come into independence. It has just gained independence. And thus, this fact is very important for you to keep in your mind as we go ahead and take this conversation forward. All right. So what you realize is that initially, both Mahatma Gandhi and Jawaharlal Nehru, the first Prime Minister, they sided with Palestine. Okay. They sided with the Palestinian cause. Now, there are 2 primary reasons for it that the article mentions. Number 1, both rejected the idea of 2 nations on the basis of religion, a problem that they wanted to avoid at home. This would be considered duplicitous if they said, well, I support the two-nation theory when it comes to, say, Israel and Palestine, but not for me. So which is why you found that this was one of the primary reasons that India went ahead and sided with the Palestinian cause. Right? Any state based on religious exclusivity, this is in fact a direct quote that has been made in that particular realm, in that particular conversation, that if you had this situation arise, and if you had this partition done purely on religious grounds, it would not stand the test of time. Okay, this was the primary understanding that time. And the second reason was that India's position was guided by the consensus of these 3 organizations, and primarily among them, the non-aligned movement. So the other 2 being the Arab world and the United Nations. All of them at that time were vociferously campaigning for the Palestinian cause. Right, so India could not afford to, say, upset the apple cart. Okay, so now what you find is India votes against the partition plan for Palestine in 1947, siding with Palestine. Now, what is the partition plan for Palestine in 1947? To understand this, we have to go back into history a bit. So let's go back into history and understand the partition plan for Palestine that was, put forward by the United Nations in 1947-48. Okay. So to understand this whole partition plan, you have to go back to the end of World War I. Right? The Ottoman Empire has broken up. Okay. So you have now this conversation arising as to, well, what's going to happen to that area? Who is going to be eventually in control of that area? And thus a very important development takes place, and that is the Balfour Declaration of 1917. Okay. So up until now, you find it's the British mandate, it's the British who are in the charge of this particular area. And at this time, the British go ahead and make a public statement. They say that, well, we are going to guarantee that there will be a home for the Jewish people in the particular region, right? The Balfour Declaration is of immense importance. Why? Because it signifies the first sort of international commitment by a particular body to go ahead and say that yes, there will be a home for Jewish people in that particular area. Okay. Now, after the Balfour Declaration comes the Palestine Mandate. This Palestine Mandate, once again, is by the Britishers, and they say, well, now you can go ahead and expect Palestine and Transjordania or Transjordan, which was essentially to be understood as a home for the Jews. Now, there was a problem with the partition plan. Okay. Straight away, you realize that a plan has been put forth where there will be a division of a particular geographical entity, division of land. And thus you find the problems arise from there. The problem is that the population of both of these entities, the Arabs, the Palestinians, and the Jewish, are not of the same order. In fact, the British census that time found that for every one Jewish, there were 2 Palestinians, which would dictate that the land distribution, the distribution of the land, should also be in equal proportion. But then, the Palestinian Mandate and eventually the partition plan, which is put forth in say 1947-48. Okay. This goes ahead and says, well, you are going to distribute the land in this proportion. 66% for the Jews and the rest, the 34% for the Palestinians. Do you see the inherent problem with this whole idea now? That the population of one segment is in the majority, but they get the lesser share of land. At the same time, the population of one segment that is not as much gets the higher share of land. And thus you have this particular disagreement. Okay. Now this is again agreeable to the Jewish people, the Jewish side, but the Palestinians are not up for it. They walk out of this negotiation and thus the partition plan fails. Now after the failure of the partition plan, you have civil war that breaks out, and that probably continues up until this date now that has graduated to a full-scale war. Right. So let's go ahead and understand the points one by one. The partition plan by United Nations. Point number 1. It recommended the partition of Palestine at the end of the British Mandate into 3 parts. So here it is, the blue part here being the British area, the Jewish area. Okay. Then you have the Arab area, and then they go ahead and designate Jerusalem, the holy city, as, if you want to understand it in the local context, a union territory of sorts. Okay. That it is going to have a special arrangement of control. Why? Because it is a site, a place of immense significance for both the Jews as well as the Arabs. Right? So, plan sought to address both Arab nationalism. Now, the British hope was that this plan would make everyone happy. But then they failed to realize that this entire basis of the distribution of the land was unequal. Okay? So, the plan was that, well, Arab nationalism, the Arab nationalists would be satisfied, and at the same time, the Zionists is the movement for Jewish nationalism, and that has gone through 2 primary phases, right? One is the establishment of a Jewish state or a home for the Jews, okay? The establishment of a Jewish state. And number 2 is the development and the security of the state once it has been set up, okay? So this has been achieved. This is currently being done, right? So the Zionist or the Zionism concept has to be understood from these 2 standpoints. Now, what you realize is that this was boycotted by the Arab leadership, whereas the Jewish leaders worked with the United Nations Special Commission on Palestine. This was a particular body that was set up to go ahead and address this dispute. Now you realize why the Arabs boycotted this entire exercise. They were unhappy with the proportion of land that they were being allotted, right? Jewish side got 2/3 of the land, while having just half the population as Arabs. Now, at this particular time, since we have discussed the Palestine plan, now it's important for us to understand what was India's approach to it then. What you find is that India sides with Palestine by voting against the plan. Okay? If you had voted for the plan, you would have gone ahead and agreed that, yes, let there be this division. Let there be this arrangement made where you have 3 particular entities being set up. But India goes ahead and votes against it. Right? So this is the formative years of India's approach insofar as the Israel-Palestine dispute is concerned. Now when we go ahead and understand the post-independence years in detail, what you find is that when Israel goes ahead and applies for admission in the United Nations, India once again votes against. Okay? India is completely one-sided with the Palestinian cause. Once again, why? Because of domestic compulsions as well as the global diplomacy that makes India behave in a particular manner. Right? So India recognized Israel finally in 1950. Only after two Muslim majority nations had recognized it. Okay? Such was the one-sided nature, the one-sided dimension of this entire exercise from the Indian perspective. Right? Finally, you have eventually a consulate being allowed to be set up between India and Israel. First consulate being set up in Mumbai. Bear in mind, a consulate is not the same degree of importance in diplomacy as, say, an embassy. Okay? A consulate is much lower when it comes to, say, the kind of facilities that you enjoy, the kinds of rights that you enjoy when it comes to comparison with an embassy. Okay? So just the first consulate being set up. Meanwhile, you find that India is getting very close with Palestine, especially with their representative Yasir Arafat. You know, the Palestinian Liberation Organization which he set up, well, it was recognized by India in 1975. In fact, India becoming the first non-Arab state to go ahead and give formal recognition to the PLO. Bear in mind, at this time, India maintains only fringe-only relationship with Israel. Now, this theme, this one-sided dimension of India's approach continues even in the middle years during Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi and Prime Minister Indira Gandhi's time. In fact, during Prime Minister Indira Gandhi's time, what you find is that there is a growing closeness between India and Palestine. Okay? Indira Gandhi government continues to support Palestine, and what you find is that the Palestine has now been given a full embassy status, whereas Israel is still a consulate. Okay? Then you have the NAM summit in 1983, and the outcome document of the summit goes ahead and mentions the Indian support for the Palestinian cause. Right? Thereafter, you have Indira Gandhi, who is assassinated. Yasir Arafat comes for the funeral. In a public display of grief, he weeps and cries at the cremation. So you have this as evidence being provided that yes, there was a lot of convergence insofar as the thoughts of the Indian establishment and the Palestinian establishment is concerned. Okay? And this thought continues even so far as Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi's tenure is concerned. Okay? During Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi's tenure, you find that this entire support, the policy of support to Palestine, even continues during the Intifada of 1987. The Intifada is essentially the uprising by the Palestinian people, a series of violent interactions that took place between Palestine and Israel, leading to a lot of loss of life and property. You know, India maintains a stoic silence. Now, the shift comes. The shift comes in the 1990s. And what goes ahead and motivates India for that shift? Well, practical reasons. Okay? What you find is, firstly, Palestine goes ahead and with the Arab countries, it has a neutral stance towards India. Right? The 62 war of China, the 65 war with Pakistan, the 71 war with Pakistan. India gets no help whatsoever from the Arab world. In fact, it's often conjured that the Arab world went ahead and supported Pakistan in these particular wars. So now India grows suspicious of the Arab world. Right? Thereafter, you find that on the other hand, the Israelis have been helping India covertly. Okay? Not just supplying arms and ammunitions, but actionable intel in the 65 and 71 war. Okay? Thus, you find that India is now slowly gravitating towards the Israeli side. And the pushing point comes when Iraq is invading Kuwait, okay, in the 90s. The global oil prices shoot up. And thus you find at this critical juncture, the PLO, remember we talked about the Palestinian Liberation Organization by Yasir Arafat, the organization devoted for Palestinian independence, for their rights of self-determination. Well, that goes ahead and supports Iraq's invasion. This pushes India over the edge. Okay? Coupled with, again, domestic compulsions, you have the rise of a popular party that goes ahead and sides with Israel publicly. Thus, you find that shift in the Indian thought process happens. Okay? So you have finally India-Israel relationships that are established. The story so goes that Prime Minister Narasimha Rao, in fact, invites Yasir Arafat, goes ahead and tells him that, well, they are going to go ahead and establish formal relationship with the Israelis so as to finally have a way and a means of pressuring them in this Israel-Palestine conflict. India cannot go ahead and engage with Israel directly if there are no diplomatic relations. Finally, Yasir Arafat says, well, it is India's sovereign matter indeed, and it is for them to decide for which country to go ahead and engage with diplomatically. Thus, you have, in 1992, the first, in fact, the formal relationships, full diplomatic status provided to the India-Israel relationship. Now comes the more changing part in the last, say, 10 to 15 years. And this India-Israel bonhomie, this love story, again has practical history behind it. What you find is that during the 1999 Kargil war, okay, you have the Israeli government supply India with precision bombs for the Indian Air Force to go ahead and use in the Kargil war. You also have a lot of actionable intelligence provided by the Israeli government to India in helping India go ahead and, well, have much upper hand insofar as the Kargil war was concerned. In fact, the story so goes that once during the ascent of the Siachen, okay, the Siachen glacier, so you had this race that was on between India and Pakistan as to who would go ahead and lodge themselves on the Siachen glacier first. And the story so goes that, well, Pakistan had lodged and put an order for these high mountainous clothing, these suits that could go ahead and operate at that particular altitude. And this particular order was placed with a company in London. Now, this was communicated to the Israeli intelligence agency, which went ahead and in a show of immense friendship, went ahead and communicated this intelligence to the Indian side, which meant that the Indians had this knowledge. Indians went ahead and got the suit. And thus you have till this date that India occupies the Saltoro Ridge on the Siachen Glacier. So you realize that India-Israel relationship is based on practical interests, both countries being victims of terrorism in some form or the other. Right? Now this, again, this relationship comes forward and is built forward during the last 10-15 years. Okay? You have obviously Israel's timely help during the Kargil war, and thereafter you have a series of high-profile visits. The Home Minister goes and visits Israel. Okay? The Foreign External Affairs Minister goes and visits Israel. These are again upgrading the relationship step by step, step by step. Okay? Now, the problem was so far the problem of hyphenation. What was often observed was that if an Indian leader was to go ahead and say pay a visit to Israel, it was often expected that they would go ahead and have a simultaneous visit to Palestine as well. Okay, so as to not upset any particular party. But this changed when Prime Minister Modi comes into office. Now what you find is in 2017, the Prime Minister visits Israel, but this time chooses not to stop in Palestine. Next year, he goes ahead and visits Palestine, but this time he does not visit Israel at all. So what essentially the Indian government, the Indian foreign policy mindset is that there should be a complete dehyphenation of this entire exercise. Okay? They are not going to be pulled into taking sides. There is going to be a neutral stance, and India will enjoy a completely independent relationship with both Israel and Palestine based on the practical dimensions. Right? So this is the arc of India relationship, the India-Israel relationship since 1947 onwards up until 2023. Now when you come to 2023, what you find is that there are many areas of convergence that we need to be aware of. So once, the economic relations, if we were to go ahead and discuss, okay, a few points for you. So if you look at the economic dimensions of this entire relationship, right, one thing that is observed is that, well, bilateral merchandise trade has gone up, okay. Bilateral merchandise, especially diamonds, is the chosen bilateral trade that has gone up by almost 50% in the last 10 years, okay. You're also finding trade in terms of defense, okay. Defense is India's primary areas of convergence when it comes to India-Israel relationships, okay. There are other areas of convergence whenever you talk of defense. For example, the spice bombs. Remember the Balakot strike, which were used in Balakot? So, well, spice bombs were used by the brave airmen of our Indian Air Force, and well, that was primarily sourced from Israel. Okay, you're looking at other forms of warfare. Again, if you let me know very quickly, if you can think of any other bombs, any other missiles that India has got from, say, the Israeli country, for example, Heron, okay, or AWOCS, early warning and control systems. Okay, this has been sourced from there. You're also looking at Crystal Maze, Python, Darby. Okay, all of these are sourced from Israel, which means once again a lot of convergence happening not just on the economic front but also on the defense front. Now you find that in terms of, say, water, okay, water is one primary area of concern for both countries, and so you had an India-Israel Center for Water Technology that was set up. Okay, the chair for this has been set up in IIT Madras. Okay, you're also finding convergence in terms of educational institutions and educational convergence happening. A lot of exchange of students happening from both sides of the border. However, in spite of all of these, there are some areas that still need to be addressed. For example, connectivity remains an issue. You only have, say, one direct flight that is operated by Air India from India to Israel, right? You're also looking at, well, peace in the region being of critical importance to India insofar as her ambitions to go ahead and engage with Europe is concerned. Okay, and thus you find that the India-Israel relationship stands at a very critical juncture right now. And even though India has this de-hyphenated policy when it comes to engaging with Israel and Palestine, what remains to be seen is eventually which way does this conflict that has erupted in Gaza and West Bank and the whole of Israel, in fact. Israel has declared that it is at war. So, well, it will be interesting to see as to how India goes ahead and, say, converges with Israel on its areas of interest, given that Israel has really gone ahead and helped India out when it mattered the most, right? On that note, my friends, if you enjoyed this discussion, if it was of a learning experience to you, go ahead and leave me a like, okay? It will be of immense help to me. I'd really appreciate it. And once again, these are the questions that I have for you that you're going to answer for me in the comment box. Now, the last class that we had on Friday, it gave me immense satisfaction to see that there was a lot of answers, and as an educator, that's the only thing that one desires, that this entire effort is of benefit to my students, right? Let's go ahead and look at the questions that I have for you guys. Question number 1, re-establishment of a Jewish nation. Option B, development and protection of a Jewish nation. Which of the above best explains Zionism? Only A, only B, both A and B, or none of the above, right? And the second question that I have for you, India and Israel have set up India-Israel Center of Water Technology. Where has it been set up? Is it at IIT Madras, IIM Kolkata, JNU New Delhi, or Forest Research Institute, Dehradun, right? Now, a very pertinent mains question also arises from this entire discussion. And so one that you can probably go ahead and say consider answering is that we'll discuss the arc of India's engagement insofar as the stakeholders of the Israel-Palestine conflict is concerned. So how are you going to go ahead and approach this whole question? Go ahead and start from the post-independent era and then come step by step with bullet points explaining what has caused this whole, say, evolution of Indian mindset insofar as engaging with both partners of this conflict, Israel and Palestine, is concerned, right? You will leave these answers for me, guys, in the comment box below, all right? Okay, before we go forward, my friends, today is the 9th of October, if I'm not wrong, and tomorrow evening is when we have the orientation class for the prelims to interview batch that seeks to go ahead and handhold the student right from the prelim stage up until the interview stage, okay? And so, well, the best part of this is that you have an extended validity that is being provided now, okay? So if you are someone who is looking to, say, go ahead and appear for 2025 or even beyond that, well, this would be one starting point that you can consider, okay? Obviously, you have access to all the paraphernalia that you expect, the handwritten notes, the books, the study material, answer writing, all of that is included in the package. But more importantly, what is provided to you is the facility of mentorships and well-quality teachers indeed. Okay, teachers who are committed to making sure that you go ahead and understand the concept rather than just regurgitate what's written in the books. All right. So go ahead and look at the course description. You'll find the sign up link in the description box below. And once you go ahead and decide to sign up, use the code BALIVE. Why? Because, well, firstly, you get a massive discount. And secondly, I go ahead and will engage with you in areas of my expertise that are geography, environment, CSAT. Okay, so we'll go ahead and prepare together, and hopefully it'll see a positive outcome at the end of it. Right? So I hope to see many of you tomorrow evening, 6 p.m. The orientation class is scheduled. Right, the second topic that I have for you from the Indian Express page is the Aditya L1. Okay, now a particular maneuver has been done by the ISRO. Okay, so we'll seek to understand that particular maneuver, but most importantly, let's go ahead and quickly revise our Lagrange points. Okay, in previous classes, we have discussed, say, the differences between L1, L2, L3, L4, L5, and so here is a very quick way of getting to understand it once again. Okay, so first, let's understand our point L1, where our Aditya mission is headed to go ahead and study the sun. Right. So now what you find is that, well, firstly, L1, it lies between my Earth and my sun. And before you go ahead and understand what exactly is L1, you have to understand that, well, both of these bodies have their individual gravitational fields, both the Earth and the sun. Okay. And thus you find that the L1 comes at this boundary between the Earth and the sun. Okay. So you may expect, so what's your practical explanation of this? That here you are, if this is the boundary of the gravitational boundary of the sun, and if this is of the Earth, okay, what you find is my L1 point is here, which means it's an unstable point. Okay, which means that you are going to go ahead and engage and fire your rockets or your engines, your rocket boosters or your engine need to be fired time and again to maintain stability. Now, you are going at this point, why? Firstly, you escape all the space debris that's around the Earth. You go in front of the Earth, which means you receive light earlier than the Earth. And obviously, it is much closer to the sun, which means you can go ahead and study the sun from up close. So that's L1 point for you. Now comes the more important points that you ought to be aware of. First, let's look at L2 also very quickly. Now, L2, here is a practical understanding of L2. What exactly does it do? Here you have the sun giving away its light. Here you have your Earth. Now, what you realize is that this is the way my light so passes. Okay? Your L2 is essentially the point here, which means it's in the zone of darkness. Okay? That you are shielded by the Earth's shadow. What's the practical application of this? Well, if you want to go ahead and study and look deep into space, you need to have shadow from behind. You need to have darkness from behind so that whatever you're studying can be reflected back to you. Okay, so all the deep space, all our Hubble telescopes, our Gaias, all of that are lodged in L2. What is L3 then? Well, you go beyond the sun. Okay, you're going behind the sun now, which means again, once again, you are not going to have visibility towards the Earth. You're not going to have communication towards the Earth. So minimum understanding insofar as the transmission of information that is coming. Fine. But what about L4 and L5? Now here it is how you go and understand L4 and L5. Okay, let's look at this. So here is my sun, here is my Earth. Okay, this is the gravitational field of sun. This is the gravitational field of Earth, obviously smaller. This is bigger. Now here you have L4 and L5, which means you straight away understand that this is an area where you're not going to experience the gravitational interactions between these two celestial bodies, which means they are considered to be metastable. Okay, that you are not going to be influenced by the gravitational field of either the sun or the Earth, right? So they come and they are made at an angle. Now you will go ahead and see that these are at an angle of 60 degrees, right? So this is the understanding of L1, L2, L3, L4, L5, pretty basic really. But in terms of the examination expectations, you are supposed to know the practical applications of each. Okay, where does gravity go ahead and interact, in which manner, and what effect does it have on my particular, say, spacecraft? So straight away you understand that at L1, you are going to have the gravitational field of the sun as well as of the Earth, which means you are going to have to go ahead and adjust time and again to make sure that you stay in shape and stay in place. But to get to L1 in the first place, you are looking at a distance of 1 million kilometers plus, right? But compared to the moon, well, this is nothing. Okay, moon is almost 25% of this entire distance. So what's the difference then? Let's look at what exactly is the trajectory correction maneuver that the ISRO has undertaken. Now understand it this way, that if you're going from the Earth to a far off body, to a far off point here, L1, If you start going from here and if your trajectory is off at the initial stage, t equals to 1 second, for example, okay, right? So you have just started your mission and here it is. You have gone off track already. Which means if you do not correct this urgently, the more farther you go, the more fuel you'll need to come back into the original orbit or the original trajectory. Is that not a particular kind of connotation? So which means for my long range missions, okay, I need to go ahead and carry out this maneuver to get back in space very quickly. Okay, the earliest you do, the better for your mission. The more fuel you conserve, eventually, as you realize that at L1, you're going to have to fire your rocket boosters, your thrusters, time and again to stay in stability. But if you have to just go ahead off the particular charted route right at the outset, you are going to spend that much more fuel to get back into the original shape, right? Now compare that to a near Earth body. So if you are going to the moon, now in this case, if this was say if this is my Earth, if this is my moon, now in this case, if this is the say projected chart in which I'm supposed to go, but here it is, if I've just veered off this much, it doesn't matter because eventually it's a short distance, okay? So what you realize is that in this case, my time period for getting my action, for carrying out my action is more. You have a lot bigger time gap to go ahead and get back into shape. But if you are going far, you should go ahead and carry out this maneuverability to get back on the road that you are going ASAP, as soon as possible, right? So what is my trajectory correction maneuver? Essentially to make sure that my spacecraft remains on the right course, okay? That it remains on the charted path that it is supposed to go to. Which means, how do you carry out this trajectory correction maneuver, okay? Trajectory correction maneuver, how do you carry it out? Simple. You just go ahead and fire your engines. Fire your engines, carry forward that particular distance, switch it off, and then carry on in the particular trajectory that you was expected to go to. But the problem is of fuel, okay? Eventually, space missions are about finding the right balance of fuel vis-a-vis the payload that you are carrying. Please understand that the Aditya mission is carrying certain payloads, okay? And so, to make sure that you have the optimum ratio between fuel and payload is of critical importance in making sure that the success of a mission is ensured, okay? Now, if you carry lesser payloads and more fuel, your mission is less efficient. If you're carrying more payloads and lesser fuel, you'll have to be really judicious with the lesser amount of fuel that you have. Wouldn't you agree with me? Correct? So that is the entire thrust of this exercise. This maneuver has been done so as to make sure that it remains on course to reach the particular L1 point that it is supposed to go to. Okay? So ISRO has carried this out. Let's look at these questions, guys. And what you are going to do once again is leave these answers for me in the comment box. Question number 3, statement 1. L4 and L5 are the only stable Lagrange points in space. True or false? B. Deep space observations telescopes use L2 point. True or false? C. The Solar and Heliospheric Observatory, SOHO, does it operate in the L1 point? And statement D. SOHO was jointly launched by NASA and Roscosmos, the Russian space organization. Okay. Which of these, how many of the above pairs in fact are correct? So you let me know. Okay. We'll go ahead and do one of those templates of 2023. Whereas question number 4 that I have for you now. Okay. Go ahead and match them. Ariane 5, is it of the European Space Agency? Long March, well, the name should give it away. You know, where did the Long March happen? If you know about that, well, you'll know which particular organization went ahead and launched the Long March. Okay. So Long March, did the Roscosmos do it? Did the Russians do it? Soyuz, was it the Japanese? And Space Launch System, did ISRO go ahead and launch the Space Launch System? How many of them are correct? Go ahead and identify the correct options for me. Right? So this was the Aditya L1 mission and a brief explainer on all the L1 to L5 points. Meanwhile, if you haven't so already, my friends, this is the Aranya series. I had a class yesterday where we discussed terrestrial ecosystems, aquatic ecosystems, wetlands, estuarine systems. Okay, we understood the differences between say, taiga, tundra, coniferous, deciduous, grasslands, equatorial, rainforests, all of them. Okay, and what I often find is students are not very clear insofar as these particular concepts are concerned. Go ahead, take a look at that discussion. It's a quick discussion, it's an informative discussion, and more importantly, I have questions for you at the end of the class. go ahead and answer them in the comment box for me too. Right. Let's move on to the third topic that I have for you. Now, we had the recent unfortunate glacial lake overflow that was observed in Sikkim that led to immense loss of life and property. Okay. Now, what you find is that a lot of the particular blame is being assigned on climate change, and for good measure. But what part of climate change, what particular component of the climate has been attributed so far? Now, obviously, there is research yet to come on this, but during the course of my research is what I found a very interesting article that goes back just a few months ago, where you find that the House panel, okay, the Parliament of India has gone ahead and suggested a study on the impact of black carbon on Himalayan glacier. Okay, so well, if the Parliament of India is studying it, which means our civil service aspirants ought to know about it. Okay, so what exactly is black carbon that we are looking at? How is it going to go ahead and affect my glaciers? Let's understand that in a very brief manner. Right. First, let's understand what exactly is black carbon, or a word that you must have often heard about it, soot. Okay, so what exactly is soot? Well, firstly, you understand this. They are formed out of the incomplete combustion. They are a product of incomplete combustion. Okay, so you're looking at combustion of woods and fossil fuels. If the whole combustion is not complete, you have these particular aerosolic say particles that are thrown out into the atmosphere. Now, please understand, when you look at the India map, okay, if you go ahead and look at the India map, and if this is my Himalayas, these are my western Himalayas and my eastern Himalayas. Okay, the atmospheric circulation, if you look at the local circulation of each of these Himalayas, is slightly different. What you find is that you have air coming on this side from the Europe's and Mediterranean side. Okay, whereas in eastern Himalayas, you have winds coming in from the Asian side. Okay, so thus you have a sort of blockage, a sort of air mass that now lies over Himalayas and is dominant. Okay, at the same time, you must have read about it that we have extensive forest fires in Uttarakhand, in Himachal Pradesh, okay, during the dry season. So what happens? You have wood that is getting burnt. Okay, you obviously have diesel cars that are going ahead and leaving their emissions in complete combustion. Okay, all of these are releasing black carbon into the air, and coupled with the wind circulation that is observed, large-scale deposition of these black carbon is happening in my Himalayan region, across my Himalayan region, in fact. Okay, a particular organization, the ICIMOD, okay, with its headquarters in Kathmandu, it has done an extensive study, okay, both on the eastern Himalayas and the western Himalayas, and has corroborated this fact that there is large-scale deposition of black carbon happening on our glaciers due to this incomplete combustion being caused by forest fires, also by the emissions of the diesel cars, and the range of other, say, industrial level emissions that you're thinking of. Right. Now what happens? What is the problem with black carbon? The problem is essentially that it goes ahead and it warms the atmosphere. Why? Because it is very effective at absorbing light. So you have, understand it this way, you have a particular, say, okay, you have this particular atmosphere here. This is my surface. Okay, here you have your glaciers. Now you have black carbon that is depositing itself not just on my glaciers, but it is also suspended as aerosols in my atmosphere. Can you understand this now? That because of the deposition on my glaciers, number one, my glaciers go ahead and start melting faster. Okay, why? Because they're absorbing sunlight, they're absorbing it, they're good at absorbing sunlight. And at the same time, because they're suspended in my atmosphere, they go ahead and trap my terrestrial radiation, thus making sure that more of such atmospheric heating taking place, which means that your glaciers start melting. Thus you find that the glacier retreat in Himalayas is one of the primary reasons, in fact, for the glacial retreat and the loss of glaciers is the deposition of black carbon or soot on the surface of the glaciers, as well as it lying suspended in my atmosphere. Right? So once you've understood this, let's go ahead and understand what are the other parts of it. Now, one important thing that you need to consider here, okay, and make sure that you understand it very simple manner. First things first, it lasts only days, which means it has a short lifespan. Now, if this was the bad news, guys, this is the good news, okay, that the black carbon or soot has short lifespan, which means that it goes ahead and eventually is is completely recycled. It's out of this system in say some amount of weeks. Okay, as opposed to say carbon dioxide, which stays for centuries, right? So what does that tell you? What's the practical connotation of it? Let's understand it. That if you go ahead and cut your diesel emissions, reduce your forest fires, there is a way in which you can go ahead and control the loss of glaciers in the Himalayas. Why? Because it has a short lifespan. But as opposed to carbon dioxide, which lives for say thousands of years, and today if you have to go ahead and cut emissions, the effects of that will be seen after thousands of years. The system, the earth will take that much time to recover from the effects of increased carbon dioxide emissions. But the earth takes lesser time to recover from the effects of black carbon, right? So this is the positive point, if you can consider it, out of this entire exercise. That if our forest fires were reduced and if my diesel emissions were reduced, if I can go ahead and reduce my incomplete combustion, then I can in the short run go ahead and reduce the rate of my glacial loss, or the GLOF, that has eventually gone ahead and led to loss of life and property in Sikkim, in North Sikkim, right? I hope this concept was clear, because this is eventually the point that you need to remember, that they have a short lifespan and thus the practical applications of it as to what it would mean for our glaciers, right? Okay, so let's look at black carbon now. So you have ISRO that went ahead and it has a network of aerosol observatories. Okay, ISRO Geosphere Biosphere Program. Now what it has shown is that, well, there is a decreasing trend insofar as the black carbon over our Himalayan region is concerned. Yet you find that you have large scale withdrawal of glaciers taking place, loss of glacial mass taking place. Okay, which means that even though we might be on the wrong path, even though on the right path, you need to go ahead and supplement the measures that are being taken to make sure that black carbon gets out of this Himalayan system right away, right? Let me know if you have any particular doubts. I hope the chat is working, guys. Is the chat working? Okay, let me know. And so, if any questions, more than welcome. But let's understand now the policy interventions. What is Bharat Sarkar doing to make sure that black carbon does not enter the system? Or if it is entering the system, how can it be minimized? How can that incomplete combustion be taken care of? Right? So let's look at few of those particular, say, policy interventions that Bharat Sarkar has taken. Okay? Thereafter, we'll answer this question. Right? So number one, the policy intervention that one can think of when it comes to black carbon is obviously our cooking fuel. Okay? Our cooking fuel through the Pradhan Mantri Ujjwala or Ujala, guys? Tell me very quickly. What is the Yojana for cooking fuels? Which means black carbon, lesser emission. Number two, think of it, guys, and let me know very quickly. Let's make it as interesting. So I had a vehicle recently. Okay. So you are looking at BS4. Yes, BS4 vehicles now being phased out, in fact, completely phased out, and BS6 emission standards have been set forward, which means you're looking at clean energy or higher efficiency of our vehicles, thus lesser emissions. Okay. What else are you thinking of? In terms of, say, the metro rails, the monorails, the electrification of our Indian railways, yes, aren't they the primary producers of or the users of diesel products? Yes, so which means my metro rails, my monorails, my green electrification drive in the Indian railways, this has gone ahead and addressed my black carbon. Think of some more, guys. Let's make it interactive. What else are we thinking of? So you have this particular, say, in the winters, the farmers of Punjab go ahead, Punjab and Haryana, they go ahead and say, burn their crops, burn whatever is left of the crops. So you have this particular mechanized system. Okay, the mechanization of crops and agriculture, it can go ahead and further reduce this particular black carbon that is emitted into the atmosphere, for sure. The FAME2 scheme obviously comes to mind. Yes, again going and focusing on addressing this very problem right at the root itself. Yes, the FAME2 scheme has been taken, the electrical vehicle scheme that we all know of today. Yes, correct, Sriram. What else are you thinking of? In terms of, say, going ahead and our brick kilns, okay, our brick kilns, which obviously go ahead and put a lot of emissions up into the atmosphere. So now those are being changed to zigzag tech. Okay. So these are some of the particular, say, institutional or policy interventions taken by the government of India to make sure that black carbon either does not enter the system, or if it has entered the system, if it is unavoidable for by chance, then at least the emissions are reduced to the maximum possible limit. Okay. So that was a comprehensive analysis of black carbon and its effect on our Himalayan glaciers. I would once again suggest to go ahead and touch with me, reach out to me if you have any particular doubts insofar as black carbon is concerned, because it is a topic that is of extreme relevance insofar as the health of the Himalayan glaciers is concerned. Okay. Now let's look at this question that I have for you. It's a previous year question from the year, if I'm not mistaken, 2010. Okay. UPSC Prelims. So let's go ahead and ask this question to ourselves. Consider the following, which can be found in the ambient atmosphere. Option 1, soot. Option 2, sulfur hexafluoride. Option 3, water vapor. Okay. Which of the above contribute to warming up of the atmosphere? You will let me know your answers. Plus, as many of you are writing, yes, Sriram, you're absolutely correct. The life mission, coder, good. Green hydrogen. Let me know. Besides, say, what we have discussed in class, you can go ahead and add mission life and green hydrogen to it. Are there any policy interventions that you can think of that the Indian state or the Indian government has undertaken to reduce black carbon emissions in India? Okay. Let me know, besides what we have already mentioned, are there any that you can think of? And that would be your further points for your mains answer. Okay. If you're asked a question on black carbon and the Himalayan ecosystem, well, you're going to go ahead and in the policy interventions part of your answer, probably write at least 5 to 6 or 7 of them. Okay. Right. Let's look at the questions of the last class, my friends, now. Okay. Let's look at the questions of the last class. Which one of the following rivers passes through the Nagaram Wildlife Sanctuary? We discussed Samakka Sarakka Yatra, that is in Telangana. Very near to that, the Nagaram Wildlife Sanctuary, and you find that Godavari is the particular river that passes through it straight away. Okay. Which of the following are positive effects of the Podu style of cultivation? Podu style is nothing but the shifting cultivation. Okay. Or what we also know as jamming. Okay, where you go ahead and burn your whole forest floor. Yes. So which obviously means you have temporary deforestation. Now what I found was that many of you answered C in this case. Please realize one thing. Deforestation in any form, manner, okay, or space cannot be considered to be positive. No matter if you have eventually a soil that gets nutrition out of it, fine. That is one concept. But eventually you also have carbon dioxide emissions. Eventually you have other organisms that die. Your soil neutrality or soil nutrition in the long run is obviously affected. Okay. So which means this is not a positive effect of chumming. Whereas nutrient enrichment of soil does happen in the short run, but again in the long run, you are finding that it does not help out. Okay. So for the purpose of this answer, we can just go ahead and consider this for the short run. Obviously, my temporary deforestation cannot be considered to be a positive effect of chumming. Okay. So your answer here being only B. In fact, D. Okay. Oh, sorry, just B. Just B. Right. Which of the following countries is not a part of the INSTC? We discussed INSTC in detail in the last class. And well, what you find is that Iran is a part of it, Ukraine is a part of it, Turkey is a part of it, but unfortunately Sweden is not a part of it. The whole point is of this project is that you're going to go ahead and link India to Russia. Right? So the countries that go ahead and become a part of this, Sweden is obviously in Europe, it's towards the west of Russia, it's not a part of the INSTC. And which of the following schools of Buddhism is His Holiness the Dalai Lama associated with? Well, it's a straightforward, a very easy question. In fact, the Mahayana school of Buddhism is what the Dalai Lama subscribes to. So the questions were pretty straightforward and the answers that I've received have been extremely well received. Monica, Vignesh, Crystal, Neeraja, Tapash, Pranjul, Vidisha, Vaishnavi, Lekam, Gopesh, Mandeep, User, Pooja, Shubham, Coder, Kabilan, Ulfat, Tanish, Harshit, your neighbor, Aditya, Rahul, Akshay and Ayush. Guys, congratulations firstly because, well, your name goes up in the, if you may so consider, the small history that we'll create together on StudyIQ IAS English. It's the first edition of Indian Express that we had in the last class, and you are the proud owners of that episode, of that particular class, right? To the rest of you, the questions that I have for you today, go ahead and answer them more importantly. You know, what's important is that you develop a question solving ability and habit, and for that, as I have always suggested, whenever you learn a concept, make sure that you solve at least 2 to 5 questions associated with it. Okay, eventually your selection is dependent on your ability to tackle questions and not just your knowledge, right? So if you have any particular questions for me, guys, I'd most appreciate it if you reached out to me. Meanwhile, please do consider leaving me a like and a comment if you like this discussion, if you understood India's approach towards Israel, if you understood what black carbon is, and if you understood what the Aditya L1 mission is and what the transfer maneuverability that is being carried out by ISRO is, right? On that note, I will see you once again tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. with another set of topics that are going to be from the explained page of Indian Express. Up until then, have a productive day, have a wonderful day. Thanks for joining. Bye.